Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a great day yesterday. Welcome to day 2. I hope everything is going well. We've got a lot planned for today, ending tonight with the New York State Craft Beer Competition Award Ceremony. So we hope that you all are going to stay for that. There will be a reception sponsored by Mangel, Metzger & Bar beforehand, and then BMI has graciously sponsored Dwayne Haggins, who, if you've never heard of him, he's amazing. And so he's bringing his band tonight to play after the ceremony. So please, I hope everybody's ready to come here tonight and have a great time. Oops, sorry. So I want to thank our conference sponsors again. Really, without them, we wouldn't be able to put this on the way that we do and everything that you see. This is our first time at the Albany Capitol Center, and I've got to say, I got to give a shout out to the staff of the Albany Capitol Center. They've done a great job, and the AV company as well. Evan, you guys have done a really great job. We're so happy to make this move. I know for those that know the Desmond, you missed the Desmond, but we're going to be here for the foreseeable future, for sure. We have an exciting morning ahead. We have Dr. J. Jackson-Beckham here, or as we fondly call her, Dr. J. I'm so excited to have her and for you to hear from her. Sorry, our sponsor was supposed to come up and talk, but he's not feeling well, so I've got to skip that part. So anyway, I want to introduce Dr. J right now. So a former professor of communication studies, Dr. J dedicated her academic career to the study of American beer. Today, she helps craft beverage organizations develop inclusive, equitable, and just practices that drive success, build communities, and empower individuals through her consultancy, Crafted for All, LLC. She is also the founder and executive director of Craft by EDU, a nonprofit whose mission is to champion equity, inclusion, and justice in the craft beer community through education and professional development. She is an author, speaker, and vocal advocate for the craft community. In 2018, Dr. J was named the Brewers Association's first ever diversity ambassador. Today, Dr. J leads the Brewers Association's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department as the association's equity and inclusion partner. And so just on a personal note, I am so grateful for her. She, as a middle-aged white man, I don't do things right, and I call Dr. J. Dr. J is just always picks up the call. She is so smart. She is so good, and I'm so excited to have you. So, Dr. J.
Good morning, everyone. How is your conference going? All right, good, 9:30, almost. I already got introduced, so I don't need to do this slide necessarily, so I'm gonna skip to this one, because it's exciting for me, and that's a thank you slide. So first, thank you for having me. As I mentioned on Wednesday night, if any of you heard me screaming over the DJ, this is our third attempt at me getting up here. We tried it in 2020, and that was 2020. And then I was with you virtually in 2021, which I was grateful to do. But now being here, feet on the ground in New York, is really exciting. So thank you so much for having me. I also came armed with a battery of thank yous from some of my colleagues at the Brewers Association. So I am going to mispronounce several names, so apologies, just know that. First, thanks goes to Fred Matt for serving on the Brewers Association Board of Directors, on the Market Development Committee and the Public Relations and Marketing Committee. Thanks to Paul Leone, chair of the BA's Guild Subcommittee, to Paul and also Matt, who serve on our Government Affairs Committee, to Christopher Erickson and Paul Garancini, who serve on Brewpub's Committee, to Paul Leinert on the Quality Subcommittee, to Bill, I'm sorry, there's a Z in the middle, so just Bill for serving on the safety subcommittee, Johnny Osborne for serving on the safety subcommittee and the CBCB's seminar selections subcommittee. So if I missed anybody else who serves on the BA committee or is involved in any other way, you have our thanks as well, and there will be some more thank yous coming down the line. So today, you might have caught at the beginning this presentation is called Stop Doing Diversity. And for a lot of people who are like, what? And I'm going to explain as we get there. But that's the key message that I want you to take away today, right? Stop doing diversity. And the first thing I'm going to do, confusingly, is to tell you why it's really important to have diversity. Right? So we will go straight to the business case, because as far as I understand, most of you in the room are in this to make some money on some part of the enterprise. And so the business case is actually important. And I think if we look through time, the business case has been established for us. Right? If we look in the past, right, if we look at maybe just the last 70 years of United States history, removing occupational barriers for women and people of color was transformative for the American economy, right? It infused us with a new pool of labor and a new pool of people who had disposable income. If we look at the present, we see that companies who are in the top quartile for diversity are high performers in comparison than those who are not. And if we look to the future, we have a rapidly diversifying country. In 25 years, more than half of the total population will be people of color, or at least the people in the labor force. So time is telling us a story, right, that this is a critical thing to do to make sure that we have viable businesses into the future. But I think right now, this particular moment is an important one to consider as well. If you have had any trouble with regard to hiring or keeping good talent, raise your hand. Okay, good number of people. And COVID didn't make that easy, right? So I think it's really important to look at the benefits of having diverse talent on your teams. And I think for me, there are 6 really important keys to look at. So you can see the first, variation in skills, in experiences, in perspectives for people coming to your jobs. I have been sneaking out in between sessions to go watch basketball. And so, the tournaments are on. So I'm watching basketball, and one thing's really obvious, right? If any team has 5 point guards on the floor, they're getting murdered, right? You can think about your teams the same way. If you have an entire staff built of this people with the same skills and competencies, you're not going to perform at your highest capacity. You don't need 5 point guards. Greater innovation. This comes from having new ideas, fresh perspectives, people who think different ways on your team. Have you heard that term, fail fast? Right? In order to innovate, you have to fail fast. So it's not about not failing, it's about failing quickly and getting to the thing that worked. Right? When you have lots of people thinking different ways, it's easier to fail faster, and so you become a more innovative team. Better problem solving. Right? I am 100% guilty of the person who tries to solve the same problem in the same way for too long, and then finally someone just walks by. Usually it's my smart-ass 14-year-old, and they come by and they're like, why don't you just try blah, blah, blah? I'm like, right? Because it worked, because I wasn't able to get out of the way I think, right? So new thinkers helps you solve problems in different ways. You get the keys to open more doors, and I think that has a lot to do with networks, right? When you hire someone, you're not just hiring them, you're hiring their networks, right? Their friends and associates, the organizations they're affiliated with, their pasts and history, so you get more keys to open more doors. You get a larger talent pool, and that's related, right, to the second thing. If you have all those keys to new doors, you have new places where people might see you as a potential employer. And probably most closely to my heart, you have more authentic connections to your community, right? Because you are connected to more people in more ways. But there's a negative piece to this, right? So if there are lots of positive correlations and lots of positive ways we can think about this, this is the negative. And that is that research tells us that if you're not leading, you are actually lagging, right? So that stat about people in the top quartile for gender and ethnic and racial diversity being correlated with high profitability, the converse is true for people who are in the lowest quartile, right? You are less likely to be above average profit if you lack diversity, especially in your leadership ranks. So the bad part is we're not leading, right? As an industry, we are lagging. And one of the things that we've been working on since 2019 at the Brewers Association is trying to figure out exactly how much we are lagging so that we know how to make progress. So for the last couple of years, we've been doing a benchmarking survey to try to get a sense of who works in the industry. This was a nationwide survey effort that we did in 2019. We repeated it and changed the methodology a little bit in 2021. So the data I'm going to show you comes from that first 2019 poll. What we have now is not substantially different, but I will say that our new data with improved methodologies says that this is probably generous, right? So because the people who were in underrepresented groups were more motivated to fill out the survey than everybody else, right? So sorry for the 100 little bars. I will make sure you can get a copy, a PDF, if you want to look at this a little bit more closely. But what you're seeing here basically is our industry broken out by just a couple of large racial, ethnic, demographic categories, and then they're stratified by different positions throughout the brewery. So couple trends that you can eyeball really quickly. The diversity, racial and ethnic diversity that we do have in the industry is concentrated in a couple of places. Front of the house service staff, production staff who are non-managers, right, and production staff who are non-brewers, so packaging, techs, and things along those lines. So you see kind of a siloing into certain positions, and then you also see a kind of a hard ceiling, right? So there's not a lot of diversity the higher you go in management. And then, probably not surprising, in ownership, that is our kind of least diverse area nationwide. This is the same set of data for gender. Similar trends, but slightly different. Unsurprisingly, you see the least gender diversity in production roles. You see lots of gender diversity concentrated in front of the house and service. And we actually see more diversity in gender, at least, among ownership. Although, you know, consistent with something I heard yesterday in a panel, that's largely because of husband-wife teams. There are not a lot of exclusively women-owned breweries. So just to kind of look at what we're doing right now. So now that you've kind of seen the data, you know the importance of doing this, and you know that we're not really achieving it, now I'm going to tell you to stop doing diversity, right? Just stop doing it. And what I mean by stop doing diversity is, I actually mean like stop putting the finish line before the race, okay? So for me, diversity is an outcome. It's something that happens as a result of doing other stuff, right? And so what we need to do is actually focus on the other stuff, and then diversity will happen as an outcome, right? And for me, this is related to a set of questions, right? And we keep asking the diversity question. In fact, that was the question that was answered by those charts, and that question is, who's in the room, right? But when you're operating your business on a day-to-day basis, I don't think you should ask that question. So, first question that you can add is the inclusion question, right? So stop asking who's in the room and start asking, have we made sure that everybody knows they are invited to come in the room, right? That is inclusion. Now, I want you to kind of hold on, because single-handedly created some like really incredible graphics to illustrate this point. And so I just want to warn you because they're amazing. All right. So here is a graphical illustration of inclusion. Right? Everybody is in the room. They knew they were invited to come have a beer, and everybody's good, right? Everybody's good? This is not a trick question. Those of you, people are like, yeah, no, everybody's not good. What's wrong? Katya, I saw you nodding. What's wrong? Some people can't reach the beer. Yes. All right, so person on the left is probably great. Person in the middle is like, after one or two, I'll be good. Person on the right is like, this blows. So inclusion is great. It's a great start, right? It's super important, it's great. But what this incredible graphic suggests is that it may not be enough to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So we want to add a second question. And that question is about equity. So equity asks, does everyone have the same experience once they have arrived in the room? All right. So now we've got everybody knowing they're invited. Is everybody able to have the same quality of experience? Right. All right. We are closer. Okay. Still not a trick question. Everybody good? Give me thumbs. Okay, yeah, there's some down thumbs. Anybody want to be brave and say like why, but why down thumb? Yeah. Yeah, solid, right? So like what's happening here is that like you have to provide accommodations so that everybody is able to have the same experience, right? And sometimes that's what you got to do. Get it, right? Sometimes that's what you got to do. But there's two inevitable outcomes, or two possible outcomes that I don't like here. One, the people in the middle and the person on the right, maybe they don't want to be conspicuously pandered to. Like maybe that's not how they want to show up in the space, right? And like, damn if that guy on the left is not gonna look over and be like, where the hell's my stool, right? It's gonna happen. It is gonna happen. So, right, and as a business owner, I know you feel uncomfortable with providing certain things to some people that you don't provide to others. That feels intrinsically wrong, right? So, last question you might ask here is a question about justice. Right? Can we eliminate the barriers that people are experiencing that kept them out of the room in the first place, or inspire them to leave, right? Cause conditions of inequality that make them want to leave. You know? And so what's your name? Jen called it. Like, what the hell was wrong with that bar? Like, why did the bar need to be at your eyebrows? Just make the bar so everybody can reach it. So for me, if you are doing inclusion, if you are doing equity, and you are doing justice, you don't need to do diversity, right? That will happen as a result. So when I think about how do we do this, right? How do we create inclusive, equitable, and just workplaces? I think it does start at the top, right? It starts with leadership. But I also think it starts at the top of a process. And for me, that process starts with having strategic goals about how you are going to accomplish things. So when you think about inclusion, equity, justice, and you're doing it in the service of not just diversity, but all the other good things that happen when you're running a workplace that way, you can create some strategic goals to help you say, you know what, we would like to arrive at this particular marker, right? And the thing that I think is super important about strategic goals in this type of work is that they have to align with your overall business goals or they're trash. right? They have to align with your overall business goals. And I think for me, there's 2 reasons that happens. One, if you're doing something that's not about what you're doing overall as a business, when times get tough, that's the first thing to go, right? Because it's not helping you achieve your central goal. But number 2, I think it's about ethics to your people and your team. It is really hard to look somebody in the eye and say, I want you to spend your valuable time and your energy doing something that you don't understand why it connects to you doing your job better, right? That's unfair to do that to employees. So that alignment work is really, really critical and I think really important for leadership. So let's say hypothetically, you decide that you want to think about reaching a demographic or a population in your community that you really haven't made inroads with, right? I remember, just looking at Audra, when we were in Orlando in the pre-COVID years, I gave them a bunch of demographic data about craft beer drinkers and age in Florida. And they skew actually very young in like craft beer drinkers. And I was like, guess what? There's a whole lot of people here that you're not selling beer to because like Florida is such a retirement center. So we can take that example. Let's say that you are in Florida and you have a community, an older community that is sizable, but you just got like, you know, who's the 21 now? Z, millennial? Who are the young ones? Z? The Zs are in there just freaking crushing hazies, right? And but there's a whole bunch of like 50 and 60-year-olds with excellent disposable income that you are not talking to, right? So you're like, you know what, strategically, we need to reach out to this community. We need to build this relationship, and it's really aligned with our overall goal of driving up taproom revenue, right? So we've got alignment, and we can make this a strategic goal. Now that we have a goal in place, then we need to say, all right, we need to do some things to try to move ourselves towards this goal. We need to put some tactical actions on that strategic goal, right? So I'm gonna maybe pick on the older folk in the room. I'm gonna call myself among them, right? And I remember, you know, we talked about inclusion. Do people know they're invited, right? I would hazard to say that lots of the folks, at least in those areas, would come to a brewery, or not come to a brewery, but they kind of didn't know they were invited to the party, right? They might have the like overall idea that that's a space for the younger people, there's nothing for me in there, right? You're not standing outside the door like, you know, stake in the ground saying like, no olds, you know, but, right, they just might not know they are invited, right? So there might be a way that you can extend that invitation, right? One brewery I worked with, they partnered up with an active adult community to create a beer education series. That active adult community actually has a shuttle bus. So they would just like fill up the bus and bring them over to the tap room. And I was like, well, that is awesome. I want to be on that bus. Right? But that was about making an invitation, like an explicit invitation, not just everybody belongs, but I'm going to get on the phone and say, hey, we'd love to have some of your folks come visit us, right? They knew they were invited. Second, they asked the equity question, right? Is everybody able to have the same quality of experience, right? This might mean, is our tap room good for folks with mobility challenges? Right? Like, are the tables super close together, or can we space them out a little bit, right? Did you write the name of your beer really small on that excellent chalk marker, but I can't see it? Right? Are there different ways that you can say, is everybody's quality of experience, are they able to have the same quality of experience? And you take care of that, right? That's some other tactics. And then, is there a justice issue? Is there a barrier, right? It could be transportation. It could be a bunch of stairs. It could be a lot of things. But the idea is here, we asked those questions. We asked the inclusion question. We asked the equity question. We asked the justice question. And that gave us our tactics, right? That told us what tactics to put in place. It said, oh, we need to do these things to make an explicit invitation. We need to do these things to make sure people's quality of experience is good. And we need to make sure we do these things to remove some barriers. All right, last part, and dorks in the house are gonna love it. You gotta measure things, right? You have to measure. So, you know, it's good to like just go and start doing things, but you will never really know if you have made progress unless you do some assessment work, right? What gets measured gets managed. So you need to attach some accessible measures to those tactics. And importantly, if they're working, you can go, cool, it worked, we do it again. Or, oh crap, that did not work, we need to change it, or we should try something else. Right? So it's not in this particular talk, but please get in touch with me. I have a set of key performance indicators of KPIs for this type of work that you might want to use. And if you're coming to CBC, we're doing a whole workshop on scorecards and KPIs for diversity, equity, and inclusion work, so take a look out for that. But this, right, if this looks remotely familiar to you, raise your hand. Okay, lots of hands in the air. And that's because this is how lots of other business practices work. This is how lots of people do safety. This is how lots of people do sustainability. This is how lots of people do quality, right? You already know how to do this work. You just need to bring this framework to it. So another thing I want to think about I have no idea where we are in time. Okay, we're getting there. Another thing I want you to think about is getting beyond demography as you think about diversity. Okay. And of course, I brought you lots of data about specific demographic categories, and we look at them because they're associated with like federal law, right, practice. But that's certainly not the only way to think about diversity. In fact, in terms of like marketing and sales, it's probably a like pretty old and not as functional way to think about diversity. So I think a couple of ways you can think about this process is also to think about psychographics and sociographics. Right? So demographics, right, that's the census stuff. Right? Psychographics has more to do about like people's beliefs and values and behaviors. So how many of you might have a business that has a bit of a like outdoorsy flavor to it? Yeah. Right? That's a very like psychographic marker, right, that you can think about when you're thinking through diversity. I went to a place that had axe throwing. I'm terrified of axes in bars, but it was cool. So those types of things, right, activities, things people like, things people believe in, things people are willing to spend their money on, are part of those psychographics. Sociographics has to do with how we gather, right? So like people who get together and reasons people to get together. I have a good friend who has a bar right outside of DC who is right next to a large Ethiopian community. And it always just bothered her that she was like, we're next door neighbors. Like, why? Like, I feel like a horrible person because like my next door neighbor community never walks in my doors. Like, what's happening? And she managed to hire someone in her tap room who lived in the neighborhood, really awesome employee that's still there. And she just asked him, like, how come nobody like comes over? Like, we're right here, like, you don't have to drive. And he was like, you don't put soccer on. And she's like, are you kidding? And he was like, no, just put soccer on, and they'll come watch soccer. And now it's like the neighborhood hangout spot, and they've even like changed their lineup a little bit. A lot of Ethiopians drink a lot of mead and like higher gravity, more residual sugar type beverages, so they keep a quad on. And they sell a crap load of it and they watch soccer. So it wasn't necessarily about like going for a specific demographic. They looked for a kind of sociographic behavior, and that's the way they were able to kind of grow diversity. So if you get the PDF of this PowerPoint, you can use this little matrix to kind of think through the same set of questions that we've been talking about since the beginning, right? We did it for demographics, but you can think about different kind of psychographic populations and say, all right, you know, does this psychographic population know they're invited, right? Does this sociographic population know they're invited? Certainly in that example, right, soccer fans were like, yeah, if you're not putting it on the TV, we don't know we're invited to come. Right? So a way to think through some of this. I think this is particularly important for people who live in areas that just don't have a lot of demographic diversity. Every time I go to Maine, they look at me like, blink, blink, blink. And I was just like, here's some other ways to do it. When you're thinking about inclusive, equitable, and just workplaces, another way to think about ways you can do some improvement is to really just think about the entire employee journey. And for me, when we're talking about the employee journey, it's like from when they first heard of you as a potential employer, right, through the separation process, when they're going out the door. Right? You can think about making an intervention at every point of the process, right? And the same way we've been doing it from the beginning, right? Ask those 3 questions and see if you, make an intervention. So let's say we're looking at, the interview process, right? And you ask the question, is this interview process as inclusive as it could be, right? Now, lots of interview processes, I think now, today, are a lot more inclusive because of COVID. So people have learned that they can do virtual interviews. They've learned to be a little bit more flexible about time, right? And so maybe you're in a good sense there, right? Equity, right? Is my interview as equitable as possible? Is everybody able to have the same quality of experience? Interestingly, and they probably won't get mad at me for telling this story, I'm good friends with the folks up in Allagash, and I was talking with our HR partner for a while, and she said that they used to do these like super intensive multiple day interviews where you would like come to the brewery one day, then come to the brewery the next day. And what they realized after some time was that like the interview process was way more challenging for people who like had an existing job and couldn't take off to go interview, and people who had caregiving responsibilities, whether they had small kids or parents at home, right? So like that interview process was like more stressful for certain people. And they realized they were like, yeah, that's, we don't want to create extra stress for a potentially good candidate, so they changed that process. Right? So you can kind of work through this whole matrix. The idea is not to fill the whole thing out, right? Like you use it as a way of diagnosing places where you might be able to make an intervention in your employee's journey to improve the process. So I want to talk to you about some additional resources you can get, and I'll tell you a little bit what we're going to do this afternoon in the 1 o'clock session. Mention CBC. Registration's open now if you want to go to the Craft Brewers Conference in Minneapolis. Specifically, we are organizing a pre-conference workshop under the banner of Thrive. Thrive is a Brewers Association initiative that takes the intersection of diversity, equity, inclusion, human resources, and wellness, and we kind of smush it all together because we think those 3 things are really interdependent, and you need to kind of do them all to do them well. So at the Thrive pre-conference at CBC, it's a whole day, like a boot camp, and we'll be doing deep dives on lots of these particular topics. We've only got 200 seats for the workshop, and I think 113 people are registered last time I saw. So if you want to do that, make sure you register soon. We also have a horde of downloadable resources on the Brewers Association website for members. This is a series, 5-part series of white papers that I authored that it's on this topic. We've got a ton of articles, we've got some marketing collateral, some assessment tools. If you're looking for things like third-party anonymous reporting tools for misconduct, we have member discounts for things along those lines. And just a wealth of material that a lot of people don't know it's there, and you absolutely should. If you aren't a BA member and you want to think about some of those things, you should talk to Jess right there. She's on the BA membership team, and she will tell you about all of what you can get as a Brewers Association member. If you have just like questions, or you did something awesome and you're like, gosh, you know what? I want to tell people I did something awesome. We have a board on BA Forums, so just look for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion board on BA Forums and join the conversation. It's a great place to just be like, what do you all do when this happens? I always am in there, members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and our subcommittees are there, so good opportunity. The American Homebrewers Association is actually an incredible tool for getting employees engaged and helping people feel a little bit more plugged into the industry, particularly if they have kind of career aspirations. The AHA is going to be looking at group rates so that employers can use to kind of provide AHA membership as a benefit to their employees. It is a great way to just get people like learning more about beer in a hands-on way, getting them connected to a community they can chat with. They get Zymergy, which I love reading still because I've been homebrewing for about 15 years now. So, you know, really good resource to like get your folks engaged in the work. We have a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion mini grants program. So if you are doing an event, if you are doing a media production project, or if you are doing a training or educational venture, you can apply for a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion mini grant. The idea is we're looking for people who are doing things that are intentionally trying to increase, right, the reach of who drinks craft beer and who makes craft beer. So we've funded a whole bunch of festivals, some of them up here, including Beer Without Beards. We funded that like 2 years ago. We did a job fair with Harpoon down in Mass. The Mass Guild also did a lecture series for owners about inclusion. So all of those things that are things that we've funded. And we accept proposals on a rolling basis. So hit the BA website. You do not have to be a BA member or a brewery to apply for these grants. They are open to anyone. We're just looking to make an impact in the community. And then lastly, and maybe most fondly for me, the Brewers Association Mentorship Program is in its third cohort right now. This is a 12-week intensive virtual mentorship experience. We have 3 mentorship tracks, so people can come in as aspiring professionals, like I've never been in the industry and I want to be, as advancing professionals, so I've been in the industry for at least a year or 2, and I'm either looking to advance my career or change directions, or as startup businesses. So I'm brewing and planning, or I have been operating for less than a year. Okay? Every mentor that comes in, or mentee that comes in, gets 5 different mentors. So they spend 2 weeks with each mentor, and they cover the gambit of different areas depending on what kind of specialization you want to do. So if you want to be in technical brewing, then you might have mentors in technical brewing, brewery safety, quality, serving and tasting beer, and management. Right? If you come in as a startup, you might mentor in human resources, finance, right, management, leadership, et cetera. So I want to take a minute to thank some people who are in the room. So Doug Miller, thank you. Paul, again, Garncini. Johnny Osborne, thank you again. James, if you're here. Max Finance, Isaac Patient, Audra, Kasingas right here. All of those folks are people who have mentored in the Brewers Association mentorship program. And I know for a fact your mentees appreciate you deeply. So this is a really exciting opportunity. And if you're interested in either being a mentor in the program or mentoring in the program, please just hit the BA website or just come talk to me and we'll get you set up for a future cohort. So I will leave you with, you know, a closing thought that I often close with. And for me, it's often what I think of as like my guiding barometer in terms of whether I'm doing the work I want to do. And that is, you know, the funny thing about diversity is that it so often gets framed as special programs for special people, right? Like it's the handout to the specific person. And for me, I think you're doing it right when it actually improves the experience for everybody, right? Everything that I talked about today is hopefully going to like level the playing field for folks who are experiencing barriers disproportionately. But at the end of the day, running a more inclusive, equitable, and just business improves the experience for everyone. So if you have more questions, you can come to the 1 o'clock session. I'll be digging into like that graph with the tactics. We're just gonna go like hard on specific tactics. So I think of that as like the how-to session. If not, that is my email, drj@brewersassociation.org. Please feel free to email me anytime. I'm here for you. And you can find me on socials like once a month at Crafted for All. But somebody will check those accounts and tell me that you got in touch. So if you want to talk, I'm happy to do so. I'll be floating around for the rest of the day. And who knows, I might get stuck here and be here for 2 more days. So thank you for your time. And if you have questions today, I'm happy to take them.
I will say this about Dr. J too, because she's been here for 3 days, and I want to thank the BA for being here too. I failed to mention how important the Brewers Association is, so I hope that you all are members of the BA and support the BA. So, so thank you, Dr. J. She's very approachable. So, like, if you have, you know, I'm one of those guys. Like, I don't know if this is a good question or not, and please, Dr. J is here. She's very approachable. So I highly encourage you to ask your questions. Up there. And here's the schedule for the day. Sessions will start at this morning at 11. Just like yesterday, we'll have lunch up here again. Please visit the exhibit hall and support them. And I hope everybody has a great day. We'll see you tonight or see you today.